After carrying the Apache woman for 10 hours, the chief told him a secret that shocked everyone. Daniel walked through the hot desert, his boots crunching over the dry, cracked earth. The sun was high, beating down on him with a weight that made the air shimmer. He had been walking for hours, moving carefully but quickly, because he had a job to do. He was a scout, someone who knew the land better than most, and he had been hired by the settlers to watch the area, track animals, and make sure no one got lost in this harsh, lonely place. The desert was beautiful, in a quiet, cruel way, but it could also be deadly if you were not careful. Daniel knew this better than anyone. As he walked, he heard something strange. A soft sound, carried by the wind, almost hidden beneath the buzzing of cicadas. It was a cry, weak and trembling, but desperate. Daniel stopped immediately. He looked around, trying to see where it was coming from. His heart beat faster, not with fear, but with concern. He had learned long ago that the desert had no mercy, and if someone was calling for help, it probably meant trouble. He followed the sound carefully, moving over rocks and dry brush, until he finally saw her. She was lying on the ground, half hidden under a small cluster of shrubs. Her face was pale and her breathing was shallow. Her clothes were torn and there were dark stains on them. She was a young woman, no more than 25, with long black hair falling over her shoulders. She looked small and fragile, but there was something in the way she held herself, even in pain, that made Daniel realize she was strong. He ran to her side and knelt down. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, even though he knew she could barely hear him. She tried to open her eyes, but they fluttered weakly, and she made a small, barely audible sound. Daniel felt a surge of urgency. She could not move on her own. She needed help, and fast. Daniel knew he had a difficult choice. There was no one nearby, and the nearest village was hours away. If he left her here, she might not survive the night. He looked at her carefully and then made a decision. He bent down, slid one arm under her back, and lifted her carefully onto his shoulders. She was lighter than he expected, but still heavy enough that every step he took sent pain through his arms and back. The desert sun beat down on him as he began to walk, taking small, careful steps. Every movement had to be deliberate. One false step could make him fall, and that would be dangerous for both of them. The woman moaned softly, and Daniel whispered words of encouragement, hoping she could hear him. "It's okay. I've got you. We'll get you to safety." Hours passed. The desert seemed endless. Rocks and shrubs tore at Daniel's boots and clothes, and his shoulders ached from carrying her. The heat made sweat run down his face and into his eyes, but he did not stop. He could feel her breathing slowly even out, and he knew that he had to keep going, no matter how tired he became. Along the way, Daniel noticed small signs of life in the desert. A lizard darted across a rock. A hawk circled above, looking for prey. The wind shifted and brought the smell of distant water, though it was too far to reach. Daniel's mind wandered briefly, thinking of the stories he had heard about the Apache people who lived in this region. He had seen them from a distance, heard tales of their courage, their connection to the land, and their strength in times of danger. And now he realized he was carrying one of them. The woman stirred slightly, opening her eyes just enough to meet his gaze. Her eyes were dark and filled with fear, but also a quiet strength that surprised him.
"Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Daniel shook his head.
"Don't thank me yet. We're not safe." He continued walking, one step at a time. The desert seemed to stretch forever, and the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon. The colors of the sky changed, deepening from bright blue to shades of orange and pink. The beauty of it made Daniel feel a strange mix of hope and sadness. He had never felt so small in such a vast place, but he also felt a growing sense of purpose. Every step he took was a step towards saving her life. By now, the woman had begun to speak more, in small, broken words. She told Daniel her name, Nokomis, and that she had been traveling alone when she was attacked by strangers. She did not explain much at first, just enough to make Daniel understand that she had been in serious danger. He listened carefully, trying to memorize every detail while also keeping his focus on the difficult path ahead. The sun disappeared completely, leaving the desert bathed in a soft silver light from the moon. Daniel's shadow stretched long across the rocks, and the temperature began to drop quickly. The desert was freezing at night, and he knew that Nokomis could not survive long if he did not find shelter soon. He searched for a small cave or even a cluster of rocks to shield them from the wind. Finally, he found a shallow crevice that would provide some protection. He gently laid her down, making sure she was comfortable. As she rested, Daniel sat beside her, exhausted but alert. He thought about the journey ahead. It would be long and hard, but he could not give up. Nokomis depended on him. He also noticed something else, a quiet feeling that this woman's life was important for more than just herself. He could not explain it, but he felt a strange connection to her story, a sense that what was happening now was part of something larger. That night, as the desert grew colder and the stars filled the sky, Daniel kept watch. He thought about his family, his home, and the world he had left behind to live and work in this harsh land. He thought about Nokomis, her courage, and the fact that she had survived until now. And he knew that tomorrow he would continue his journey, carrying her through the desert, step by step, until they reached safety. Morning came slowly. The desert was quiet except for the occasional bird or the rustle of small animals. Daniel lifted Nokomis onto his shoulders again, his muscles stiff and sore, but his determination stronger than ever. He walked steadily, sometimes talking to her, sometimes thinking quietly. He was learning her story in pieces, understanding more about who she was and why she mattered. By the end of the first day, Daniel had carried her for hours under the scorching sun and the cold night wind. He had faced exhaustion, fear, and the endless desert itself. Yet, through it all, he had never considered giving up. Nokomis had survived because of him, but he felt that he was also surviving because of her. Something about their shared struggle created a bond that went beyond words. And as he looked at the horizon, seeing the faint outline of hills that might hide a village or a safe place, Daniel knew that the journey was far from over. 10 hours still lay ahead, and every hour would test him further. But he was ready. For Nokomis, for the desert, and for the secret that was quietly waiting to be revealed, he would keep moving, one step at a time. Daniel rose before dawn, his muscles stiff and sore from the previous day's journey. The desert was quiet, bathed in soft, pale light. He gently lifted Nokomis onto his shoulders again. She stirred and opened her eyes, looking at him with a mixture of fear and trust. "Are we going to be okay?" she whispered. Ah. Daniel nodded. "We will. I promise. Just hold on." Every step he took was slow and careful. The desert was treacherous. Rocks jutted out unexpectedly. Sand shifted beneath his boots, and the wind carried sharp grains that stung his face. Daniel's arms ached from carrying Nokomis, and his back felt like it had been hammered by 1,000 blows. But he did not stop. He could feel her weak heartbeat against his chest, a reminder of how fragile she was, and that gave him strength. The hours passed slowly. Daniel had traveled many deserts before, but nothing had ever been as difficult as this. The sun rose higher, casting harsh light over the barren land. Sweat poured down his face, stung his eyes, and soaked his clothes. Nokomis clung to him, whispering small fragments of her story as they moved. She told him about her family, her village, and the Apache tradition she cherished. Daniel listened carefully, even as his legs burned and his throat felt dry. As they walked, he noticed small signs of life: the tracks of deer, the distant call of a hawk, and even the flicker of rabbits darting through the brush. Each sign reminded him that the desert, though harsh, was alive. And it reminded him that he and Nokomis were not alone, even in this vast emptiness. By mid-morning, Daniel felt the first sharp pangs of doubt. His arms trembled, and his vision blurred slightly from fatigue. He had carried Nokomis for hours already, and the desert seemed endless. I can't stop, he whispered to himself. But he knew he could not afford to rest for long. If he stopped completely, she might grow weaker, and the desert could take her life. Nokomis spoke softly as they moved, her voice filled with curiosity. "You? Why do you help me?"
You don't know me." Daniel smiled weakly.
"I know enough. You need help, and I can give it."
"That's reason enough." She nodded, though she did not fully understand.
Still, her eyes reflected gratitude, and that small recognition gave Daniel a surge of energy he did not know he had. The sun reached its peak, and the heat became unbearable. Daniel's shirt clung to his back, drenched in sweat, and his face felt like it was burning under the sun. Each step required immense effort. He thought about stopping in the shade of a rock, but there was almost none to be found. The desert offered no mercy. Every rock, every shrub, every step was a challenge. Yet he pressed on, driven by the fragile life he carried on his back. After a few more hours, Daniel began to hear the faint sounds of danger. A rattlesnake hissed from a nearby bush, startling both of them. He froze, then carefully moved to keep it away from Nokomis. She gasped, clinging to him tightly, but he whispered, "It's okay. It's gone." In that moment, he realized how vulnerable she was and how much responsibility he had taken on. As the day wore on, Nokomis's words became more revealing. She spoke of her people, the Apache, and the struggles they faced. She mentioned the elders and warriors who had guided her village for generations. Daniel listened intently, fascinated by her stories, even as every muscle in his body screamed for rest. There was a quiet courage in her words, a bravery that matched the physical strength he was using to carry her. By mid-afternoon, Daniel's vision blurred from exhaustion. He stumbled on loose stones, nearly falling several times, but he caught himself each time. Nokomis held on tightly, whispering encouragement as if her words could also carry him forward. "You, strong," she said simply. "You, help me." Daniel smiled, though he was too tired to speak fully. He could feel the bond between them growing, forged in the desert, in pain, and in the shared struggle to survive. The sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the sky with brilliant streaks of red and orange. The desert, though still harsh, seemed a little more beautiful in the fading light. Daniel pushed forward, his every step heavier than the last. His arms felt like they were about to give out. His legs were shaking. But he refused to stop. Nokomis's life depended on him. As evening approached, Daniel realized they were halfway through their 10-hour journey. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "Almost there," he whispered to Nokomis. She tried to smile, but the effort made her wince. "You carry long time," she said, voice weak. Daniel nodded. "I know, but we're going to make it." Together, night fell, and the desert became cold. The temperature dropped sharply, and the wind cut through their clothes like icy knives. Daniel pulled Nokomis closer, trying to shield her from the chill. They had to keep moving. Stopping completely could be dangerous. He kept his pace steady, careful not to trip over rocks or loose sand. The stars above them were bright and endless, a silent witness to their struggle. During these long hours, Daniel learned more about Nokomis. She spoke of her dreams, her fears, and her hopes for her village. She told him about a secret she carried, though only in fragments, never fully revealing it. Daniel listened, sensing the importance of her words, though he could not yet understand the full meaning. Something about her story suggested that her life and her survival was about more than just her own safety. At one point, Daniel collapsed to his knees, exhausted and unable to continue for a few moments. Nokomis, weak as she was, reached up and touched his arm. "No, stop," she whispered. Daniel shook his head. "I can't. Not now. Not yet." He stood again, every movement slow and painful, but he moved forward. The bond between them had grown too strong for him to give up. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Daniel began to see the faint outline of hills in the distance. Hope surged through him. He did not know what lay beyond them, whether safety or more danger, but the sight of something beyond the desert gave him energy he had thought he had lost. He whispered to Nokomis, "See that? We're almost there. Just a little further." She nodded weakly, clinging to him as he continued forward. By the end of the 10-hour journey, Daniel was completely exhausted. His body ached from head to toe, his arms trembled, and his legs felt like they might collapse under him. Yet, he had made it. Nokomis was alive, breathing steadily and looking up at him with eyes full of gratitude, and something else, something Daniel could not quite name. Relief, hope, and trust all mingled together in that gaze. As they approached the base of the hills, Daniel realized that their struggle had created a bond that went beyond simple survival. He had carried her for 10 hours through the desert, faced danger, exhaustion, and fear, yet he had not wavered, and in return, Nokomis had shared her story, her courage, and her trust. Together, they had survived the desert, and together, they had forged a connection that neither of them would forget. Daniel looked at her and smiled, though he was too tired to speak much. Nokomis whispered softly, "You, strong. More than I ever know." Daniel nodded, feeling a mixture of pride, humility, and awe. The journey had tested him like nothing else ever had, and he knew that the experience had changed him. The night settled in fully now, with darkness covering the desert and a gentle chill in the air. Daniel knew they still had to find safety, shelter, and water, but for the first time in hours, he felt a small sense of hope. They had survived the desert together, and that meant they could face whatever came next. As they moved toward the faint lights of the village beyond the hills, Daniel realized something important. This was not just a journey of survival. It was a journey of trust, courage, and unexpected friendship. And though neither of them knew it yet, this journey would lead to a secret that would shock everyone and change their lives forever. The desert had tested them both, body and spirit, but they had endured. And as Daniel carried Nokomis forward into the unknown, he knew that their story had only just begun. Daniel and Nokomis moved slowly but steadily toward the hills in the distance. The village lay just beyond them, small but alive, nestled in a shallow valley surrounded by rocky ridges. Smoke curled from several small fires, and the faint sound of voices reached their ears. Daniel felt a surge of relief. After hours of struggle across the desert, they had finally reached the edge of safety. As they neared the village, Daniel could see the people moving about, tending to daily tasks. Children played near the fires, women carried baskets of food, and men returned from hunting or work in the surrounding land. The sight was comforting, but also intimidating. Daniel knew that outsiders were not always welcomed in Apache villages. He hoped that the villagers would recognize the effort he had made to save Nokomis and trust him, at least enough to accept their presence for the moment. Daniel carefully stepped into the village, keeping his eyes alert for any sign of hostility. Nokomis, still weak, clung to his back. Her breathing was steadier now, but she was still fragile. As they entered the central area, several villagers stopped what they were doing and stared. Their expressions were a mixture of surprise, concern, and curiosity. Daniel could feel the weight of their gazes. He tried to appear calm, even though he was exhausted beyond words. A woman stepped forward, her eyes sharp and assessing. "Who is this?" she asked, her voice steady but cautious. Daniel spoke carefully. "Her name is Nokomis. She was hurt in the desert."
"I carried her here to help her."
He gestured toward her, careful to show that he meant no harm. The villagers exchanged quick glances. Some nodded silently, while others whispered among themselves. Daniel realized that they were deciding whether to trust him. Finally, an elder, a man with silver hair and deep lines on his face, stepped forward. His eyes were thoughtful, and he seemed to measure Daniel carefully. "You have done a great thing," the elder said. "Carrying her through the desert is no small task. You have risked yourself to save her life. That is worthy of respect." Daniel nodded, grateful for the words. Nokomis's eyes brightened slightly, and she gave him a faint smile. He felt a deep sense of relief. For the first time in hours, he allowed himself to feel that maybe they would be safe here. The villagers guided them to a small dwelling near the center of the village, a place where Nokomis could rest and recover. They carefully helped her to the ground and began tending to her wounds, cleaning them and applying bandages. Daniel watched quietly, too tired to speak, but he noticed the careful, respectful way the villagers treated her. It was clear that Nokomis was someone important to them, though he did not yet know why. As the villagers worked, Daniel finally allowed himself a moment to rest. He sat down against a rock, letting the exhaustion wash over him. Every muscle ached, and his body felt heavy, but he knew he had done what he had to do. Nokomis stirred slightly and reached out to touch his hand.
Thank you,
she whispered again. Daniel shook his head. "No, we did it together. You survived because you never gave up." She looked at him with gratitude, her eyes reflecting a mix of relief and trust. Daniel realized that their shared struggle had created a bond stronger than either of them had expected. As the evening approached, the village grew quieter. The fires burned brighter against the darkening sky, and the villagers settled into their homes. Children were called inside, and the men returned from tending their work in the surrounding land. Daniel stayed near Nokomis, unsure of what to do next. He had brought her here, but now he wondered what would happen. Would they accept him fully, or would he remain an outsider? It was then that the village chief appeared. He was a tall man with a commanding presence and eyes that seemed to look straight through Daniel. He walked slowly, observing both Daniel and Nokomis, as if weighing their worth. When he stopped in front of them, Daniel straightened, uncertain of what to expect. The chief spoke with calm authority. "You have done something remarkable," he said, his voice carrying a weight that made Daniel listen closely. "You have carried Nokomis through the desert when few would have had the strength to do so. For this, you have my respect." Daniel bowed slightly. "Thank you, Chief. I only did what I had to do." The chief nodded. Yes, you did what you had to do, but there is more to this than just strength.
Nokomis, she carries a gift and a responsibility that few understand.
Your actions have brought her safely to us, but now the time has come for you to understand her place in our village. Daniel looked at Nokomis, who had grown quiet, her dark eyes reflecting both curiosity and a hint of fear. She did not speak, but Daniel could feel the tension in the air. The villagers seemed to sense it too, pausing in their work and looking toward the center of the village. There was an unspoken understanding that something important was about to happen. The chief motioned for Daniel and Nokomis to follow him to a small, private area near the center of the village. As they walked, Daniel noticed the careful, respectful distance that the villagers maintained. He realized that Nokomis was no ordinary woman, and that her survival meant something significant to them. He had sensed it before, but now it was clear. When they reached the private area, the chief turned to face them.
Nokomis,
He said gently,
your journey was not just about survival.
you carry a lineage that is sacred to our people. Your presence here is not by chance. Daniel has brought you safely, but the time has come for the truth to be known. Nokomis's eyes widened, and she looked at Daniel. He could see the mixture of fear and anticipation in her expression. She whispered, "What? Truth?" The chief's eyes softened, and he spoke slowly. "You are a descendant of a great warrior who once led our people through times of danger. Your blood carries the strength, courage, and wisdom of those who came before you. That is why your survival is so important. That is why Daniel's act of carrying you was more than a rescue. It was a turning point." Daniel felt a chill run through him. He had known that Nokomis was special, but he had not understood the full extent of her importance. The village chief's words confirmed it. He realized that the woman he had carried for 10 hours was not just anyone. She was someone who carried the hopes and future of an entire people. Nokomis looked at the chief, then at Daniel. I don't understand," she whispered, her voice trembling. Daniel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's okay. We'll understand together. Right now, you just need to rest." The chief nodded. Rest is important, but so is preparation. In the days to come, you will learn about your lineage, your responsibility, and the ways you can help our people. Daniel will stay here, not just as a friend, but as someone who has proven his courage and loyalty. You two have already faced the desert together, and that bond will guide you as we move forward. Daniel realized that the chief's words were more than guidance. They were a recognition of what he had done, and an invitation to become part of something larger. He looked at Nokomis, who was slowly beginning to understand the weight of the revelation. There was fear in her eyes, but also determination. She had survived the desert, faced danger, and now she faced a truth that would shape her entire life. The villagers began to gather around, their curiosity tempered by respect. They watched quietly, giving Daniel and Nokomis space, but their presence reminded Daniel that this was no longer just about survival. It was about belonging, about responsibility, and about the future of the village. As night fell, Daniel and Nokomis sat together near the small fire in the village center. The sky above was filled with stars, shining brightly over the desert and the village that had become their temporary home. Daniel's body ached from the journey, but his mind was alert, filled with thoughts about the village, the chief's words, and the secret that had been revealed. Nokomis leaned slightly against him, still weak, but gradually gaining strength. She whispered, "Daniel, thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you didn't carry me." Daniel shook his head. "You carried yourself too."
You didn't give up. That's why we made it.
The chief watched from a distance, his expression calm but thoughtful. He knew that the bond between Daniel and Nokomis would be important in the days to come. Their shared struggle had created trust, courage, and loyalty, qualities that would be needed as they faced the challenges ahead. That night, as the village settled into quiet, Daniel realized that their journey had changed both of them. The desert had tested their strength, patience, and determination. It had forced them to rely on each other in ways they had never imagined. And now, as they rested in the safety of the village, they could begin to understand the importance of what had happened. The 10-hour journey, the struggles, and the secret that Nokomis carried within her. For Daniel, the journey was far from over. He knew that the days ahead would be filled with new challenges, lessons, and discoveries. But he also knew that together, he and Nokomis could face whatever came next. The village had accepted them. The chief had revealed the secret, and the bond they had formed in the desert would guide them through the uncertain future. And as the stars shone brightly over the village, Daniel felt a quiet sense of hope. Nokomis had survived, the secret had been revealed, and the journey they had begun together was only just starting. The morning light filtered gently through the small opening of the dwelling where Nokomis rested. Daniel had stayed beside her through the night, keeping watch and offering quiet comfort whenever she stirred. The desert outside was calm, but inside, the air was thick with anticipation. Today, the chief had said they would finally understand the truth about Nokomis, the secret that had been kept hidden for generations. Nokomis sat up slowly, her dark eyes filled with nervous curiosity. She looked at Daniel and whispered, "I am ready, I think." Daniel nodded. "I'll be right here with you. Whatever comes, we face it together." She gave him a small, tentative smile, and Daniel could see a flicker of hope in her expression. The chief arrived shortly afterward, flanked by a few elders of the village. His presence was commanding, yet calm. He motioned for Daniel and Nokomis to follow him to the central gathering area of the village. As they walked, the villagers had begun to gather silently, sensing that something important was about to happen. Children peeked from behind the walls of their homes, and adults exchanged curious glances. The village had become quiet, the usual sounds of daily life subdued by the weight of expectation. When they reached the center, the chief motioned for Daniel and Nokomis to stand before him. He spoke slowly, letting each word sink in.
"Nokomis," he began, his deep voice carrying across the silent crowd. "You have survived what few could endure.
The desert tested you, and Daniel carried you through hours of hardship, showing courage and strength. But your survival is not just by chance, it is part of a greater purpose." Nokomis looked around at the faces of the villagers, then back at Daniel, her voice trembling. "What? What purpose?" The chief's eyes softened as he addressed her directly. "You are a descendant of a great warrior, a woman who led our people in times of danger and guided us through conflict with wisdom and courage. Your blood carries the strength, leadership, and spirit of that lineage. That is why your life matters so much to our people." Daniel's breath caught. He had sensed that Nokomis was special, but he had never imagined the depth of her importance. He looked at her, seeing the shock, fear, and awe in her eyes. She reached for his hand, trembling, as though needing support to bear the weight of what she had just heard. The chief continued, "Your ancestor united tribes when divisions threatened our people. She taught that courage alone is not enough. One must have wisdom, compassion, and the will to protect others. Those qualities are in you, Nokomis. They have guided your steps even before you knew it, even in the desert, even now." Nokomis's lips trembled as she whispered, I I never knew. All my life, I thought I was just
ordinary.
The chief shook his head gently.
Ordinary
Is a word that has no place here. You carry the legacy of our people. That legacy has been waiting for you to awaken it. Daniel has helped you survive, but the future of many may depend on what you do next. The villagers were silent, their faces filled with reverence and quiet awe. They had watched Daniel carry Nokomis for hours, seeing the sweat, exhaustion, and determination on his face. They understood now that his courage had brought not just her life, but a living symbol of their history safely to them. The elders nodded quietly, acknowledging the significance of the moment. Nokomis turned her gaze to Daniel. All this, all of it, I never imagined, she whispered. Why? Why did you help me? Daniel shook his head gently. Because it was the right thing to do. You didn't ask me to, but I couldn't leave you. I carried you because you needed me to, not knowing who you were. But now I see. Your life is bigger than any of us. That's why it mattered so much. The chief stepped closer to them both. Daniel, you have shown the spirit that our people honor. Bravery, loyalty, and compassion. You carried her for 10 hours through the desert, protecting her from the dangers that would have ended her life. That act alone is remarkable, but it is also a symbol. It shows that trust and courage can cross boundaries, and that even outsiders can be part of something greater when they act with heart. Daniel felt a wave of humility. He had not acted for recognition or reward. He had acted because he had to. Yet now, hearing the chief's words, he understood that his simple act had greater meaning than he could have imagined. He looked at Nokomis, who was beginning to steady herself, absorbing the weight of the chief's revelation. The chief addressed the villagers next. This is a moment for all of us to witness. Nokomis's survival is a sign of hope and strength. Her lineage is a reminder of our ancestors' courage and wisdom. We must support her, guide her, and honor the life that has been preserved through Daniel's courage. Let this day mark the beginning of a new chapter for our people. The villagers murmured softly, a mix of awe and respect filling the air. Children stared wide-eyed, elders nodded thoughtfully, and even the youngest warriors looked on with a newfound reverence. Daniel realized that their attention was not just on Nokomis, but also on him. His effort had earned their trust and gratitude. He felt an unfamiliar but welcome sense of belonging, as though this village, these people, and their history were now part of him too. Nokomis took a deep breath, feeling the gravity of what had been revealed. I never asked for this, she admitted softly. But I understand now. I have to be strong. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. You don't have to do it alone. I'll be with you. We'll figure it out together. She nodded, and for the first time, she seemed to believe it. Not just the words, but the promise. The chief smiled, sensing the resolve growing in her. Your strength has been tested already, Nokomis. You have survived the desert, the struggle, and the fear. Now, you must learn to channel that strength for the benefit of your people. There will be challenges ahead, decisions that will require courage and wisdom, but you are not alone. Daniel has proven himself a friend and ally. Trust him and trust yourself. Nokomis's eyes filled with tears, but they were not tears of fear. They were tears of understanding, of acceptance, and of determination. She realized that the journey through the desert had been more than a physical struggle. It had prepared her for this moment. She had faced her limits, relied on another, and survived against the odds. And now she faced a truth that could shape the future of her people. Daniel watched her closely, feeling pride and awe. He had seen her strength in the desert, but now he saw her courage in a new light. She was no longer just a woman he had carried. She was a leader in the making, a symbol of hope, and someone whose life mattered to many beyond herself. He felt honored to be part of her story. The chief addressed them both one final time for the moment. Remember this day. It is a day of revelation, survival, and trust. You have faced the desert, the unknown, and fear itself. Now you face the truth. Let it guide your actions and inspire courage in those who follow you. Daniel, your loyalty and bravery have preserved more than a life. Nokomis, your awakening marks the continuation of a legacy that must never be forgotten. As the villagers began to return to their homes, the gravity of the moment lingered. Daniel and Nokomis remained standing together, holding hands, understanding that the desert had tested them, but the village, the chief, and the revelation had now tested their hearts and minds. The journey through the harsh land had been physical, but this was now a journey of understanding, courage, and purpose. That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, casting long shadows across the village, Daniel and Nokomis sat quietly together. The fires of the village glowed warmly, and the air was filled with a soft, peaceful energy. Nokomis turned to Daniel and whispered, I think I understand now. I have to be strong, not just for me, but for them, for all of us. Daniel nodded, his eyes reflecting the firelight. And you will be. You've already survived the desert. You'll survive this too, and I'll be right here every step of the way. Nokomis smiled faintly, feeling the comfort of his presence and the bond that had formed between them. That night, under a sky full of stars, they both understood that the journey was far from over. The desert had tested their bodies, but the revelation of the secret tested their spirits. And as they looked at the village, the people, and the legacy that Nokomis carried, they knew that the days ahead would require courage, wisdom, and trust like never before. But for now, they could rest. They could reflect on what had happened, the journey they had endured, and the bond they had forged. The secret had been revealed, and with it came both responsibility and hope. And as the desert night surrounded them, Daniel and Nokomis felt a quiet determination that they would face whatever came next together. The morning sun rose slowly over the hills, casting golden light across the Apache village. Nokomis had slept well for the first time since her journey through the desert. Daniel had stayed nearby, keeping watch, as he always did. The night had been quiet, peaceful even, but both of them knew that a new chapter in their lives was beginning. The desert had tested them physically, but now they faced the challenge of understanding their roles and what the future held. Nokomis stepped outside, feeling the warm sunlight on her face. She took a deep breath and looked at the village stretching out before her. Children were already playing near the small fires, and the adults were preparing for the day. It was a simple life, but it was filled with purpose and community. She felt a mixture of awe, responsibility, and determination. The secret of her lineage weighed heavily on her, but it also gave her strength. Daniel approached quietly, carrying a small water skin and a few supplies. "Morning," he said softly. Nokomis smiled faintly. "Morning." "Thank you for staying." Daniel shook his head. "I couldn't leave you." "Not after everything." She nodded, understanding the depth of his words. Together they walked toward the village center, ready to face whatever came next. The chief met them there, his expression calm but approving. "Nokomis," he said, Today you take the first steps toward embracing your responsibility. You have survived the desert, learned to trust, and discovered the truth of your lineage. Now it is time to begin preparing for the future." Nokomis listened carefully. She felt a sense of purpose she had never experienced before. The fear she had felt during her journey was still there, but it was now accompanied by determination. She looked at Daniel, who gave her a reassuring nod. His presence reminded her that she was not alone, that she had someone who believed in her, and that they could face the future together. The chief led them through the village, introducing Nokomis to key members of the community. Each person greeted her with respect, some offering quiet words of encouragement. Daniel observed the interactions, realizing that Nokomis was not only being accepted, but honored. The villagers' trust in her grew stronger with every word the chief spoke, and she began to understand the weight of her position. Over the next few days, Daniel helped Nokomis as she learned more about her heritage. The elders shared stories of her ancestors, tales of courage, wisdom, and leadership. They taught her how to listen to the land, understand the signs of nature, and use her instincts to make decisions that would help the village. Daniel absorbed everything alongside her, learning more about the people he had come to respect and care for. Despite the lessons and responsibilities, there were moments of quiet reflection. Nokomis often found herself alone, staring at the horizon where the desert stretched endlessly. She remembered the struggle to survive, the exhaustion, and the fear. But she also remembered Daniel carrying her, the bond they had formed, and the strength she had discovered within herself. These memories reminded her that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Daniel and Nokomis sat by a small fire. The village was quiet, and the stars began to shine overhead. "Do you ever think about the desert?" Daniel asked softly. Nokomis nodded.
Every day it was...
I was afraid, but I also learned so much about myself, about courage, about trust. Daniel smiled faintly. "I think about it too. Every step we took, every hour I carried you, it changed me too. I realized that courage isn't just about strength. It's about heart, loyalty, and doing what's right, even when it's hard." Nokomis looked at him, eyes filled with gratitude and understanding. "And I learned that I am stronger than I thought. I survived because of you, but also because I had to survive. I had to." The chief observed them from a distance, satisfied with the progress they were making. He knew that the bond between Daniel and Nokomis would guide her as she embraced her role. He also knew that their journey together, through the desert and now through this new life, had forged trust that would be essential for the challenges ahead. In the following weeks, Nokomis began to take a more active role in the village. She participated in council meetings, learned how to guide younger members, and helped resolve small disputes. Her confidence grew, and the villagers respected her wisdom and courage. Daniel continued to support her, offering guidance when needed, but he also allowed her space to grow into her own. One day, as they walked together along the edge of the village, Nokomis paused and looked at the distant desert. "I never imagined my life would lead me here," she said softly. Daniel nodded.
Neither did I, but I think we were both meant to be here.
"Together, we can face whatever comes next." She smiled, feeling a sense of peace she had never known. The village had begun to thrive under the quiet strength of Nokomis's leadership and Daniel's support. They planted new crops, repaired old structures, and strengthened the bonds within the community. The lessons of survival in the desert had translated into resilience and determination in their daily lives. Each day brought new challenges, but they faced them together with courage, wisdom, and trust. The chief called a gathering one evening. The villagers assembled around a large fire, and he spoke of the journey that had brought them all together. He told the story of Daniel carrying Nokomis through the desert, of her discovery of her lineage, and of the courage and trust that had guided them. The villagers listened in awe, understanding the significance of every action and every decision. Daniel and Nokomis stood together as the chief concluded. "Remember this day," he said.
Bow!
"It is a day of courage, trust, and hope. The journey of the desert is over, but the journey of life and responsibility continues. Nokomis carries our legacy, and Daniel has proven that true courage can come from the heart. Together, they remind us of what is possible when we face challenges with strength, wisdom, and loyalty." As the villagers cheered and offered their respect, Daniel and Nokomis exchanged a glance. They had survived the desert, uncovered a secret that could change lives, and found a place where they belonged. The journey had tested them in every way imaginable, but it had also given them purpose, trust, and hope. That night, as they sat by the fire alone, Nokomis spoke softly. "I feel ready now. Ready to face whatever comes next. Ready to lead. And I feel grateful for you, Daniel, for the village, for the chance to survive and to grow." Daniel smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. "You've always had the strength."
I just helped you see it, and we'll face the future together.
The desert outside was quiet, bathed in silver moonlight, but inside the village, hope burned brightly. Nokomis had embraced her role, Daniel had found his place, and the village had a renewed sense of strength and unity. The challenges of the past had forged a bond between them that would last a lifetime. As the first stars of night appeared, Daniel and Nokomis looked at the horizon. The journey through the desert had ended, but their story was far from over. Together they would face every challenge, guided by courage, trust, and the knowledge that even in the harshest places, hope and strength could endure. And so the village continued, stronger and more united than ever. Nokomis walked with purpose, carrying her ancestors' legacy forward. Daniel stayed by her side, loyal and unwavering. The desert had tested them, the secret had revealed itself, and together they had found a life filled with courage, trust, and hope, a life that promised a brighter future for all who called the village home.